The biblical story of Zephaniah, the prophet of the day of the Lord. Zephaniah is one of the minor prophets of the Old Testament, the author of the book that bears his name, composed of only 3 chapters. Despite its brevity, the message of Zephaniah is intense and profound, dealing with themes such as divine judgment, the purification of the people, future restoration, and the day of the Lord. His ministry took place during a critical period in Judah's history, marked by corruption, idolatry, and external threats, especially the rise of the Babylonian Empire. This text seeks to present a comprehensive view of the biblical account of Zephaniah, highlighting his historical context, his prophetic message, the meaning of the day of the Lord, and its implications for the people of Judah, as well as for contemporary readers. Who was Zephaniah? The name Zephaniah means the Lord protects, or the Lord hides, perhaps reflecting the prophet's hope or divine purpose. He is identified as the son of Cushi, and is thought to have belonged to a priestly or royal lineage, which suggests that he may have had access to the court of Judah's king. His prophetic activity occurred during the reign of King Josiah, who ruled Judah between 640 and 609 BC, a period marked by religious and political reforms. Although Josiah's reign is considered one of spiritual renewal in Judah, Zephaniah's message reveals that the people were still deeply involved in idolatry and social corruption, making divine judgment inevitable. Historical context: Judah, in the 7th century BC. To fully understand Zephaniah's prophecy, it is essential to analyze the historical setting of the kingdom of Judah at the end of the 7th century BC. It was a turbulent era, characterized by political instability and external threats. The mighty Assyrian Empire, which had dominated the region for decades, was in decline, while new powers such as Egypt and Babylon contended for control of the territory. Josiah attempted to bring about a deep religious reform, eliminating idols and restoring the worship of Israel's one true God, as described in 2 Kings 22-23. Yet despite these efforts, moral and spiritual corruption persisted among the people, and many continued to practice idolatry and social injustice. It was in this context that Zephaniah prophesied, warning of the nearness of divine judgment and the urgent need for repentance. The central message of Zephaniah, the book of Zephaniah, is marked by a strong emphasis on the day of the Lord, a theme that appears repeatedly and defines the nature of his prophecy. This day is presented as a time of imminent judgment and great disaster for Judah and for all nations. However, alongside judgment, there is also the promise of restoration and blessing for those who remain faithful to God. Judgment against Judah and Jerusalem. Zephaniah begins with a dramatic description of the judgment soon to fall upon Judah, brought about by the people's moral and spiritual corruption. Will the Lord not completely destroy the kingdoms of the earth? Will he not bring an end to the inhabitants of the world? Zephaniah 1:2. The prophet denounces idolatry, injustice, and indifference to the covenant with God. He also condemns corrupt leaders and rulers who fail to practice justice or defend the poor and oppressed. That day will be a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of devastation and destruction. Zephaniah 1:15. The day of the Lord, judgment and hope. The day of the Lord dominates the book, representing the moment when God will intervene decisively in history to punish the wicked and vindicate the righteous. Zephaniah paints a terrifying picture of this day, using images of darkness, storms, and consuming fire. The Lord will be a protection for his people, a refuge for the poor in times of distress. Zephaniah 1:17. Yet beyond judgment, the prophet brings a message of hope. God does not desire total destruction, but rather the purification of his people, so they may live in faithfulness. There is the promise of Jerusalem's restoration, unity among nations, and a future of peace and prosperity. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will renew you in his love. He will exult over you with singing. Zephaniah 1:7. The condemnation of neighboring nations. In addition to Judah, Zephaniah directs his prophetic message against several surrounding nations, such as Philistia, Moab, Ammon, Cush, and Assyria. These nations are accused of arrogance, violence, and oppression against the people of God. Their downfall would form part of God's judgment that would prepare the way for Israel's restoration. Then I will purify the lips of the peoples, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord and serve him shoulder to shoulder. Zephaniah 3:1. Structure of the book of Zephaniah. The book may be divided into 3 main sections, reflecting the progression of the prophetic message, the imminent judgment upon Judah and Jerusalem. In this chapter, The prophet announces God's coming judgment on Judah because of its idolatry and corruption. The language is severe, and the tone is that of an urgent warning to the unrepentant. The day of the Lord is declared to be a day of darkness and distress, the judgment against the nations. Here Zephaniah expands his prophecy to include the surrounding nations that will also face God's wrath. Cities such as Gaza, Ashkelon, Ekron, and others are named, and their downfall is foretold. This section emphasizes that God's judgment is universal and that no nation lies beyond his reach. The restoration and future hope. The final chapter shifts in tone, presenting a message of hope and restoration for Judah. God promises to purify his people, gather the exiles, and restore Jerusalem as a glorious city. His presence will be a source of joy and protection for his people. The theme of repentance. A crucial aspect of Zephaniah's message is the call to repentance. The prophet urges the people to seek God humbly and abandon their sinful practices. Seek the Lord, all you humble of the land, you who do what he commands. Zephaniah do abundantiga. Repentance is presented as the only way to avoid judgment and attain restoration. The role of social justice. Zephaniah not only denounces religious idolatry, but also exposes the social injustice that permeated Judah. The oppression of the poor, the corruption of leaders, and the indifference to human suffering were common practices that the prophet condemned with severity. His message underscores the inseparable link between faithfulness to God and the practice of social justice. The meaning of the Day of the Lord in Zephaniah. The Day of the Lord is a unique moment in history when God intervenes to judge nations and purify his people. It is at once a day of terror for the wicked and a day of salvation for the faithful. This concept appears in other prophets, such as Joel and Amos. But in Zephaniah, it carries a particular emphasis, due to the nearness and intensity of the announced judgment. The Day of the Lord is not merely a future reality, but also a present urgency that calls for reflection and transformation. The importance of Jerusalem in Zephaniah's prophecy. Jerusalem plays a central role in Zephaniah's ministry. The city, symbol of the covenant between God and Israel, is both the target of prophetic criticism and the object of divine restoration. Zephaniah condemns Jerusalem's sins, arrogance, and disobedience. Yet he also proclaims that God will bring renewal and glory. On that day, declares the Lord, I will leave within you the meek and humble, who trust in the name of the Lord. Zephaniah, Jamtiga, lewat 12 menit. Jerusalem will become the center of God's presence, a place where the people will experience peace and justice. The prophet's voice amid crisis. It is important to note that Zephaniah's voice arose during a time of great crisis and uncertainty for Judah, while Josiah sought to reverse the kingdom's spiritual decline. External threats increased, and the people remained resistant to genuine change. Thus, the prophet functioned as a herald of both impending judgment and renewed hope. His message challenged not only the ruling and religious elite, but also the common people, summoning all to a deep and sincere transformation. Zephaniah reminds us that true faith cannot be separated from justice, humility, and obedience to God. Practical applications of Zephaniah's message. The message of Zephaniah remains relevant today, offering valuable lessons on faith, repentance, justice, and hope. Among the main applications are the urgency of repentance. The Christian life requires constant reflection and transformation, turning away from sin and drawing nearer to God. Social justice as an expression of faith. To be faithful to God includes fighting injustice, defending the oppressed, and living with integrity. The sovereignty of God, recognizing that God reigns over all nations and that his judgment is both just and necessary. Hope in restoration. Even in difficult times, faithfulness to God brings the assurance of renewal and future blessings. If this inspiring story resonated with you, be sure to share this video with someone who needs to learn about Zephaniah. Activate the notification bell, subscribe to the channel, and leave your like. We'll meet again in the next video with more inspiring stories like this one.